Arnold Schoenberg was a composer who fled Nazi Germany to settle in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, that was a melting pot of artistic ferment at the time. Schoenberg was also the pioneer of the 12-tone system. Now, that's a system where all the 12 notes of the chromatic scale, every black and white note on a piano, is given equal importance, and they're cycled around so it prevents any sort of emphasis on just one note, which is different to a lot of the so-called tonal music we know, where there's a home key, where there's a home, where we find that we always have somewhere to go. Maybe it was his way of turning away from so much destruction that had gone before and sort of democratizing music where each note is equal. Who knows? But he was obviously deeply affected by what happened in the war, by what happened to his countrymen. And from Los Angeles, where he was separated from a lot of the horror, he still took on so much of the devastation and the destruction that was happening in Europe at that time. And so he wrote a piece, a tremendously courageous and affecting piece, A Survivor from Warsaw. Now, A Survivor from Warsaw is a cantata for narrator, men's chorus, and orchestra, and it's testament to the courage of those who were persecuted and those who lost their lives in the Holocaust. The piece tells a story, a real story that was recounted from a survivor from a concentration camp in Warsaw. In this story, the Nazi authorities at the camp, they demand a roll call of prisoners. There's some confusion in assembling and in lining up, and so the guards beat all the prisoners, and the old and infirm just stay on the ground. They're presumed dead. The guards demand another count just to determine who will be sent to the gas chambers. The guards demand the count to go faster and faster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until the prisoners spontaneously break into the Jewish prayer. They break into the Jewish prayer, Shema Yisrael. Now, what's interesting is that Schoenberg specified that there wasn't to be a hint of pitch or melody to this narration. It is a spoken narration.
I cannot remember everything. I must have been unconscious most of the time.
And it's in English, in fact, mostly. There's the English of the story. There's the German of the captors, of the prison guards, of the Nazis. And then there's the Hebrew of the prayer at the very end. But Schoenberg specified that there was not to be a hint of pitch or melody in this narration, because I think he wanted to preserve a very direct connection between the horrors that the narrator talks about and the audience, and any sort of beguiling melody might loosen that connection between the horrors and between the people who are listening to this story take place. Now, Schoenberg is wonderful in his word painting in this piece. That is to say, he uses musical elements to reflect the pictures, to paint the pictures, literally, that are happening in the text. For example, there are grotesque trumpet and horn fanfares that signify the military calls that would have been heard through the camp. Or when he talks about the pain of hearing the prisoners groaning and moaning, you hear these wailing descending woodwinds and strings.
It was painful to hear them groaning and moaning.
When the narrator talks about laying aside, half conscious, it had become very still, fear and pain. And so Schoenberg employs this technique, literally called Swoon Ponticello, which means on the bridge. And it's a technique where a violinist, where a string player will play on a certain part of the instrument to create this glassy, almost ghostly sound. And then when the narrator talks about beginning again, when the count begins again and these harried prisoners get faster and faster and faster, like a stampede of wild horses. These pizzicato strings, these pluck strings, get faster and faster, and these castanets reflect the stampeding, the hoofs of the horses.
Faster, so fast that it finally sounded like a stampede of wild horses.
And then, of course, they break into this glorious prayer. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. It's an imploring prayer, but the accompaniment is still diabolical and savage. It leaves a question in our minds about whether this whole war was futile or not.